So if a woman wants to get rid of an unborn fetus, it's considered murder, but if somebody has a dead person inside of them, they immediately need to be destroyed. Dead lives matter.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Evil Dead 2 kicks off the adventures of Ash as he takes his girlfriend to a remote cabin for a quiet getaway, and things immediately go awry. And the reason I say that this kicks off things is because Evil Dead 2 isn't technically a sequel. It feels like more of a remake of the first movie. I mean, why would Ash go back to this cabin if he knows what's going to eventually happen? The best way that I can make sense of this having a 2 in the title is that this movie is following different people who are going to the same cabin. You know, the main guy just so happens to look like one of the people from the previous movie. If comedy comes from suffering, then I would say Evil Dead 2 is the ultimate proof of that. I mean, when you look at it, this film tells a very dark and downright depressing story, but it's executed in such a strange, cartoonish way that you often can't help but laugh. Also, this film could have been pretty boring if they had cast the wrong actor to play Ash. I mean, throughout a good chunk of the running time, you're only following that one character. I mean, spoiler alert, his girlfriend isn't in the movie that much. And every time Bruce Campbell is on screen, he absolutely gives it his all, and he is just a joy to watch. I don't feel like there are very many people out there who would be able to pull off quite as convincing a scene where they're wrestling with their own demonically possessed hand. I mean, I've been caught doing that myself a couple of times, but I still haven't convinced my mom that I wasn't, playing with myself. Fuck off! I wasn't doing that! I'm kidding. She wasn't actually there. She's buried under the basement. As for the special effects in this movie, I'd say they're kind of a mixed bag. There are some bits that look pretty fake, like when the eyeball is flying across the room, although the fakeness kind of adds to the enjoyment of the movie for me. But then you've got other effects that look downright amazing even by today's standards, like there's a point where the severed head of Ash's girlfriend, like I said, the storyline is pretty sad. Her head starts talking to him, and the first time I watched this movie, I genuinely had no idea how they pulled that off. Now, when I was revisiting this movie for my review, one thing that I was initially ready to nitpick is the fact that throughout the film, as Ash is dealing with all this craziness in the cabin, the film keeps cutting to these other side characters who are also headed towards the cabin, and they're really not as funny and interesting as the main story that's going on. For one thing, those cutscenes are necessary to the story for the obvious reason that it would be kind of silly to have these people just randomly show up to the cabin right out of nowhere with no establishment. But for another thing, with all of this insanity going on in the cabin, eventually the audience is going to need a breather, otherwise it'll just get too overwhelming. In the end, there's really nothing about this movie that I don't like. I mean, as I've said, some of the effects are a little cheesy and dated, but that cheesiness kind of adds to the enjoyment and comedy of the movie. If you're interested in seeing a perfect blend of gruesome horror and slapstick comedy, then Evil Dead 2 definitely comes highly recommended. It is not only one of my favorite horror movies out there, but one of my favorite films of all time. And with that, I hope y'all have a good one.